Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Maddie here. Today we're going to be talking about the best decks for ranked mode for the end of this ranked season. We have literally like 2 days left, so I figured I'd get this video out here and help you guys play the best decks that I believe are going to help you, reach Master Ball or reach top 5,000, top 1,000, whatever it is you're trying to do. The strategy here, since we have such little time, is going to be towards, kind of high roll strategies, right? We're going for those win streaks. We're playing decks that have really high potential, but might not be considered the most consistent decks out there. And I do believe that this is probably the best strategy towards the end of the season. And I think that the metagame has progressed actually over the last few days. So we're going to cover all of the best decks. We have 7 decks today. Definitely go and test these out on the rank ladder. Before we get into that though, don't forget, if you're gonna not play ranked this weekend, or if you want to take a break, then go ahead and go play in the Pocket Mads Pocket Tournament. Number 12, it's cut off here on the screen, but $100 cash in the prize pool and a full art professor's research. This is going to be tomorrow, Saturday, December 13th at noon Eastern time. Would heavily recommend that you guys go and play. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. So anyway, let's dive right into it. The first deck we're going to talk about is going to be Greninja Absol. Really, this is a deck that I'm kind of dubbing right now, like high roll control. This is a deck list that is exceptionally strong in basically every way that you could possibly think of, although it can be a little bit awkward depending on which Pokemon you have available to you. We are playing double Greninja and we're playing double Cyrus, right? So we have that sort of control aspect where we can target bench Pokemon and then, target whichever Pokemon we want realistically by bringing them up with Cyrus. We're playing double copies of Chingling. This will be our preferred starter Pokemon. I do believe Chingling is probably one of the best cards to play in the entire game right now. And if you're not playing Chingling, you better be playing a very, very strong, explosive deck. However, even the strongest decks in the game do struggle with Chingling. I believe it's probably the best card right now, and I would heavily recommend whatever deck you play, either be Chingling with a couple of exceptions to that. So Chingling is going to be our preferred leadoff option here, and then we have Darkrai and Mega Absol. I do love Darkrai in this deck a lot, and Mega Absol is useful in those late game scenarios where we need a Pokemon in the active spot and we need to maybe discard a Cyrus, right? So that's the whole concept here for this deck list. We go into the Chingling lock, maybe stop our opponent from going into their Greninjas, and then we evolve our Greninja, and then we can kind of target the bench, bring whatever Pokemon we want up, and then we can target them with the Mega Absol late in the game. That's the whole concept here. Every single card in this deck is a control card, from item lock to bench damage to discarding supporter cards with Darkness Claw with Mega Absol EX. And we also have Darkrai EX, which is very underrated in this deck. You can actually take KOs on basic Pokemon very early, right? And Chingling is going to stop your opponent from evolving those basic Pokemon. Between the 10 damage from Chingling, the 20 damage from Nightmare Aura, and the Water Shuriken damage, we can actually deal up to 50 damage per turn while keeping the item lock in place, which is really, really important. So I really like this deck. Again, it can be a little bit awkward if you go first and you lead Darkrai or you lead Absol. You're probably going to be in a pretty difficult position. However, even if we are going second and we lead any of those Pokemon, you can just detach and then retreat into Chingling. Technically, you go -1 energies, but oftentimes getting the Chingling lock is worth it. So I really like this deck. It is what I use to finish my ranked grind, mainly because I sort of wanted to play something different, and to be honest, I wanted to play Chingling, but the Altaria stuff to me was getting a little bit stale in terms of its playstyle, so I figured why not, let's play this deck list. I think in terms of its overall potential is kind of the strongest deck right now, or at least one of the strongest decks. Just really, really hard to compete with, and again, Chingling, very, very impressive. So many Pokemon in the game right now get shut down by Chingling. I would heavily recommend playing Chingling in your deck lists, and this is going to be sort of the first deck we're going to talk about today. But next up is going to be, as you'll notice, a very, very similar deck list, which is actually going to be Mega Altaria and Greninja, which again, this to me is sort of the high roll way of playing Mega Altaria. It's not the most consistent thing in the world. You can get Chingling locked yourself early on in the game, which doesn't feel very great. And when we're playing, double Greninja, double Froakie, double Cyrus in Mega Altaria already, that doesn't leave a lot of space in the deck, which is why basically we have to resort to playing one Lissia, one Pokeball, and then research, Copycat, Cyrus, and Rare Candies, right? The deck here doesn't have any space for any tech inclusions, and this is really just about utilizing Greninja and Cyrus to take KOs very consistently. It also boosts the damage of Mega Altaria, right, which can only hit for 130. Typically, when you are playing Mega Altaria, you're going to play other, damage modifying cards like Rocky Helmet or Red. Since we're playing Greninja, not only do we not need those cards, we don't necessarily have space for them. But keep in mind, you are playing Chingling, but you're also getting shut down by Chingling, so it's important to note that you're kind of on both sides of the coin there. But this is also a deck that is tremendously strong. Again, high roll way to play Altaria. Whenever you can get Greninja out on your second turn, you have a ton of potential here. One thing I really love about this deck list is the Sing attack here with Swablu. In fact, when you're playing this deck, it oftentimes will come down to whether or not you get a sleep active or not. It's the only counterplay to opposing Chinglings. You got to hope that you can flip heads with Sing and hope that your opponent stays asleep and misses an attack with Jingly Noise so that we can go ahead and evolve our Froakie into our Greninja. That's really the only way to win against Chingling when you're playing this deck list, oftentimes, because you don't want to bring in your Mega Altaria too early. So this is a really strong deck list, but again, it does rely very heavily on the coin flips to keep your opponent asleep or not. If you get lucky on your coin flips, it's very hard to beat this deck because your Pokemon gets stuck in the active, and then they can just sort of set up their board with Greninjas and stuff. So a very, very strong deck, but also a bit of a high roll deck. And that is, I think, the main difference between this deck list and then the Mega Absol version. It's a little bit less consistent overall in its strategy, but still extremely strong, again, if you can flip heads with Swablu. So that's sort of where we're at currently in the metagame, right? It's bench damage, it's Cyrus, it's Greninja, it's Chingling. I mean, these are cards that are exceptionally strong if you get them all out properly, if you can draw the right cards, and if you can flip a couple of coins, right, with Swablu. This deck list is absolutely incredible. I'm sure a lot of people have faced this deck on the ladder, but that is sort of a defining characteristic of this deck, is whether or not you can flip heads with Swablu. I mean, that's literally oftentimes your win condition, which, obviously doesn't feel very good, but, it's a coin flip, right? Sometimes, you get lucky a couple of games in a row with coin flips and you win the game. The other cool thing about playing Mega Altaria is that sometimes you can go second and just attack for 130, and sometimes that is enough, which is really cool. So I like this deck. I don't necessarily like it as much as the Absol version of it, but again, Chingling with Greninja is proving to be one of the strongest combos in the entire game, so it's something that we have to recommend in today's video. Next up is going to be Hydreigon, and Hydreigon is sort of the high roll king right now. It is still absolutely insane. Now, this deck list here is not playing Zweilous, but we are playing our own Chingling. And I think that's sort of the way that we have to play Hydreigon right now, is just playing Chingling because it is so good. Double Rocky Helmets, right? So the idea here is the combination of Chingling and Rocky Helmet oftentimes will beat other Chingling decks. So if you're in like a Chingling head-to-head battle, if your Chingling has Rocky Helmet and you have Indeedee, you should be able to win the head-to-head Chingling battle, and that's enough to basically mean you don't have to play Hydreigon. But as we see here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 basic Pokemon, and only one of them is Chingling. So we're oftentimes going to be retreating into this Chingling to get the item lock down. So it's a bit of a slower roll deck, but in the late game, if you get a Hydreigon out, it is enough damage to kind of pressure wins in a lot of scenarios. So I really like this deck. Sabrina can be really nice. The Sabrina Cyrus combo. Basically, every deck in this video is going to be playing Research and Copycats, so this deck is no exception to that. I really like this list. In fact, if we go back here, I want to make a note just about this deck list. We're not playing Rocky Helmets here. And the main reason why we're not playing Rocky Helmet is that oftentimes it doesn't really matter. That extra damage can come from Darkrai, which is obviously really relevant. X-Speed and Red Card are very, very good cards in the mirror matchup as well. So no Rocky Helmets for this deck. I actually just think that these two cards can just be played as well if you need to copycat. It makes the deck very consistent. I would recommend this build above playing Rocky Helmets in this deck. But when you're playing Hydreigon, you maybe don't necessarily have that privilege of playing Darkrai, so Rocky Helmets kind of fit the bill there. But yeah, the same kind of thing that we've seen, right? Indeedee is going to find its way into a lot of different deck lists. It's also just really good to keep Chingling alive, right? So in the face of, a Water Shuriken Greninja or a Froakie or a Darkrai, what Indeedee can do is kind of keep Chingling alive, right? And keep that item locked down. It's really, really cool. It's a good strategy. But this is definitely high roll. It definitely, is reliant on Hydreigon coming out. And Mega Absol here. 2 copies of it is a little bit sketchy, but you know what? We're doing what we got to do to win games. You know what I mean? So yeah, there we go. I think Hydreigon is still a good deck list, although it's not something I would necessarily recommend as highly as some of the other decks in this video. It is, of course, still very good. And that's going to lead me to the next deck list, which we're going to talk about, which is Mega Blaziken. And this is an updated version of Mega Blaziken here. We are playing 1 Combuskin, and we're playing 1 of each Heatmore. Now, this deck list here is playing double Cyrus. I do believe that is still the standard if you are playing Mega Blaziken, but what I would recommend, if we're not playing double Tongue Whip Heatmore, I would play 1 Cyrus and 1 Sabrina personally. I think Sabrina is absolutely phenomenal in Mega Blaziken, because oftentimes Sabrinaing out that active Mega Pokemon that's at full HP is sort of your win condition to kind of take, that last 1 or 2 prizes, right? Without needing that Pokemon to have damage onto it to bring it up into the active with Cyrus. So I would recommend Sabrina in Mega Blaziken still, unless you're playing double Tongue Whip Heatmore. where we can target more bench Pokemon. I would not be playing Double Cyrus in this list personally, but I do like the Combustion Heatmore, mainly just because it's better into Chingling, right? So I like the 1-1 versions of Heatmore here, but I would just play 1-1 Sabrina Cyrus personally if I was playing Blaziken. Blaziken's not a deck that I can play personally just because I'm not lucky enough to play this deck. I always go first and I lead Torchic. Blaziken just doesn't seem to be very friendly to me, but I do know the potential of Blaziken is still top tier. It is a very, very strong like high roll deck list, and the Combuskin as well is relevant. This is a deck that actually uniquely can handle Oricorio better than some other decks, which is pretty cool. So I like Blaziken. I really do think it's still a good choice. A bunch of people in our Discord server community have been climbing very, very high with Blaziken. It's still something I'd have to recommend, and I do believe it's like a top 7 deck currently in the active metagame. So we got to recommend Blaziken still. I think it's still kicking. It might not be as popular as some of the other decks right now on the ranked ladder, but I know some of the top players are still playing Blaziken, and there's good reason for that. It's exceptionally strong. So if you're feeling lucky, if you like Blaziken, if it's friendly to you, then go ahead and try it out. Definitely a strong deck. Next up, though, we have to let you guys know something, okay? 50% of you guys, there's a 50-50 chance if you're watching this video right now, you are not subscribed to the channel. So I would heavily recommend that you consider hitting that subscribe button. It supports me, it supports the community. I would greatly appreciate it, and it's also free. It doesn't cost you anything, so hit that subscribe button. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Anyway, let's move on here. Next up is going to be Orimag, and here's the thing. Oricorio Magnezone seemingly is having a lower and lower win rate into Suicune and Greninja, but the cool thing about Oricorio Magnezone is that it's in general just a good deck list. It's very, very consistent. Magneton is broken. We have Capes, we got PCL, we have Guzma. It is the default de facto Oricorio deck, and as we all know, Oricorio is going to be relevant, right? A lot of these decks that we've taken a look at, they really do kind of come down to using a mega Pokemon, right, to kind of deal the majority of the damage oftentimes, right? Whether that's Blaziken, Altaria, or Absol, like these EX Pokemon are still very relevant to the overall strategy, even if they are playing things like Chingling and they're playing Greninja. This is also a deck that doesn't care about Chingling, which is really nice when you play it. Oricorio definitely slows the game down, gives you a lot of opportunity to build up Magnezone. This is still a phenomenal deck list. It's still one of the best decks in the entire game. I would heavily recommend Oricorio Magnezone. I would. And the cool thing about this deck list is that it's not necessarily a high roll deck, whereas everything else in the metagame that's kind of worth playing is sort of being built as sort of these high roll combo decks, like with Greninja and whatnot and Rare Candies. So this is one of the few exceptions to that. I think there's a couple of decks that aren't necessarily, high roll type decks. And again, when I say high roll, I just mean decks that are very reliant on like early game combos, like getting Rare Candy stage 2, Greninja on the board, like turn 2, like that's what a lot of decks kind of come down to, which is a very strong strategy. But again, not having to deal with Chingling is really nice, and just being a bit more of a tempo consistent deck is also really cool. And I love Magnezone, I really do. I made a post on our community page that there was a Magnezone like on the pack art for the upcoming mini set Crimson Blaze. So we also have that new supporter card that mentions Magneton. So we could be getting a new Magnezone EX. That could be really, really relevant. I'm really interested to see what that looks like, if it does come at all. We have already this Magnezone right here, which is lightning type. And then in what is it called? I forget the Triumphant Light. In Triumphant Light, we got the Arceus Link Steel type Magnezone. So if we are getting a third Magnezone, I'm going to assume that it's going to be an EX, which I'm excited about because it could be really good into Suicune. So we'll have to wait and see. That's all speculation, but I just wanted to mention it in today's video. Don't be surprised if you see a new Magnezone EX coming in the next Crimson Blaze mini set. But yeah, I would definitely still recommend Magnezone. You could throw in Chinglings to this deck, but it kind of makes it a little bit more awkward once Greninjas do get up and running, just because like this is a deck that can't stop Greninja from coming unless you have Chingling. So it's not something I would necessarily recommend too highly, but it is going to be pretty good in a couple of those decks that we saw early on, right? Because Greninja is definitely something that can deal with Oricorio pretty well. So I love this deck. I really, really do. It always is going to come down to whether or not you can get the Magnemites, Magnetons out pretty early, because that's sort of the backline for the deck list, and that doesn't always happen, but I do find this deck to be pretty consistent. So have to recommend Oricorio Magnezone, still a top deck right now in the metagame. And then next up is going to be Suicune and Greninja, which is still a top deck. Like, I think that the entire meta right now is sort of reliant on Suicune and Greninja. It is like the meta driver. Not only is it the most played deck, both in ranked mode and in tournament play, but it's the deck that you're either playing or you're playing to beat, right? It is sort of the driver in terms of which decks are meta, reliable right now. And that's kind of what we're seeing, right? These other sort of Chingling decks that are also playing Greninja are really built to beat Suicune and Greninja, because it also plays Greninja, but it doesn't play Chingling, right? So theoretically, in the head-to-head, if you're playing Greninja and Chingling, you should beat Suicune and Greninja, which is not playing Chingling, right? So that's the whole concept with those control decks, is that they can play Chingling and Greninja and hopefully beat Suicune, right? Orimag typically has a pretty good matchup into it. Blaziken actually traditionally does pretty well into Suicune and Greninja as well. So that's the whole idea of the end of the season metagame, is either play Suicune Greninja or play all these other decks that feel confident into that matchup. So this is definitely like... it's Suicune Greninja. I would say that this is like a top tier deck, but I think a lot of people are maybe confused. Like, I think it's like the default deck currently in Pokemon Pocket, so it's seeing the most play, which if you take a look at tournament results, it's oftentimes at the top of the standings. It has won our tournament in back-to-back weeks, but I think the reality of it is that Suicune Greninja isn't nearly as much of like a tier 0 deck as it was in previous seasons. There's a lot of other options. Chingling has been a massive deterrent to Suicune, and I think that Blaziken also kind of deals with Suicune pretty well. So I really do like this deck list, but it's not nearly as strong as some people make it out to be. It'll probably continue to see play next season unless something else in the metagame completely overtakes it. But it's definitely not as much of a factor as it was in previous seasons. So I think it's a little bit overblown personally, but it's still really strong. So we have to recommend it in today's video. And yeah, if you're playing this deck, good luck with Chingling, because you're going to be playing Chingling a lot. That is for sure. But yeah, we had to mention it, in today's video. Next up and lastly is going to be our wild card, our weekly wild card, which is something that we've seen before, and it has been picking up a little bit of steam. It's a deck that I actually quite like, which is going to be the Dragon Arcana Altaria deck. And this is a deck that is playing only Psychic Energies, but we're playing Pichu, we're playing Mantike. It got second place at our tournament last weekend, and it's been making a lot of moves, both in ranked battles and in tournament play. And this, to me, is just a very consistent way to play Mega Altaria. What's cool about this deck is, yet again, we don't have to worry about Chingling at all, because none of our Pokemon, we don't even play any item cards in the deck. We're playing one Pokeball, one red card, but we don't have to worry about Chingling, and we're very aggressive, and we're good going first because of the baby Pokemon, right? Pichu and Mantike, which allow both Altarias, or at least Dragon Arcana Altaria, to attack on your second turn going first, which is very relevant. And it's just sort of the traditional sort of prize math, right? Where you go through 2 stage 1 Pokemon, and then a Mega Altaria, which is always going to be difficult to deal with. And then we also have Oricorio in the deck, which can just win games in its own right. Now, the whole Greninja thing is probably not very good into this deck, but the thing is, oftentimes your opponent is probably going to have like a Froakie or a Chingling or a Greninja or whatever in the active spot. So what the Dragon Arcana Altaria does is it kind of puts a lot of pressure on in the early game, and you're oftentimes going to be getting that Pokemon out because, again, 3 baby Pokemon, they have free retreat, they can set up the energies to the Swablu, and then you can start attacking with Dragon Arcana on your second turn. So it's basically like an aggro deck. It's a very consistent like kind of strategy, but it's more aggressive than really anything else in the game. This does remind me of like Turbo Sovali back in the day. This is sort of the spiritual successor of it. And when you're playing this deck list, it's just 100 damage turn 2, and you just kind of hope that you can carry through the game on that, right? And sometimes Oricorio comes in clutch, but most of the time Dragon Arcana is putting in enough work to win games, and I really do like it. Very consistent, like I said, double Lycia, double Copycat, 1 May. We're not playing any damage modifiers here. We do have 1 red card, but this deck is all about consistency. It's all about attacking early on in the game and hoping that damage can overcome your opponent. So I really like this deck. I really do. I think it's one of the best decks right now, and I think that it is sort of different than a lot of the other decks, right? It's one of the only like real aggro decks that isn't necessarily high roll in the active metagame, and I think that makes it unique, but I also think that it actually is pretty well positioned because of that Mega Altaria possibility on the back line, like late in the game, right? No other deck really has that. It's just, it's more aggressive, it's more fast paced, and I think that's the one thing that we've been kind of missing this season, is everything feels either control, like high rolly, or you know, like, or Suicune Greninja, you know what I mean? It's like, do we get turn 2 rare candy, or are we playing Chingling Lock or Oricorio, you know what I mean? Like, or are we Suicune? So this is really the only deck that kind of doesn't fit those particular archetypes that have been dominating all season, which is what I really do like about this deck. I honestly love it. You know, you're safe from Chingling, you're safe from Oricorio, so you're covering a lot of bases there, and it's very consistent, very fast paced. I really do like this deck, so I wanted to recommend it here, and it has been sort of, you know, picking up some steam. It's not just sort of like a meme deck here. I do consider this to be like a real deck in the metagame. I think earlier this week we put it like B tier, but I do think it has more potential than that. I think it might be operating at like an A tier level right now. So I really do like it. Again, the high roll strategies are probably better at the end of the season here to get on those little win streaks, but, you know, whatever works for you, you know what I mean? And I wanted to mention this deck because it is, I think, kind of the wild card right now, actively in the metagame. So there we go. I'm interested to see what the tournament results look like. I know that the results don't necessarily matter that much because we'll be going into the new season next week. The set releases on Wednesday, which is going to be pretty cool. But at the end of the day, guys, I think that we're going to be getting new cards. The meta will be refreshed, and I'm really excited to see what happens. I would heavily recommend, though, that you go ahead and participate in the last tournament of the season. Maybe you win some cash, maybe you win a full-out research, who knows? You'll be featured on Meta Monday next week, and it's going to be pretty exciting. So that's the video today. It's a short one. I wanted to keep it short. I wanted to keep it sweet here. Again, only a couple of days left of the ranked season, so go ahead and get ready for it because, you know, it is a bit of a grind, but this season was more of a sprint than a marathon, and I actually think it had a different feel to it. I know some people don't necessarily like that. They feel a little bit rushed, but I think for a lot of the people who don't have time to play, you know, 50 games a day for an entire month, I think this season was actually a little bit of a refresher. But it is seeming like the next season is going to be like a full 6 weeks, just like we had this time. It might get a little bit stale 2 or 3, 4 weeks into next season, just because we're only getting 1 booster pack instead of 3. We'll have to see how that goes. But again, the light at the end of that tunnel will be B2, which is going to be releasing after Crimson Blaze. And that is going to be a really interesting time for the metagame. So I think there's a lot of surprises coming in Crimson Blaze. We'll see when the set gets leaked or the data miners get their access to the set list and we see all of the cards. You're going to want to stay tuned for all of that news on the channel for sure. But yeah, I mean, here it is. We're at the final stretch here, and it's always exciting when that comes into effect. So don't forget to subscribe if you're in that 50%. Don't forget to register for PMPT number 12. And yeah, that's the video, guys. We'll see you next time. Good luck on your ranked grind. And yeah, there you go. Peace out. Bye.